The warm laughter of her mother once filled Zuwena's world, wrapping her in love and comfort. But everything changed when sickness stole her mother away, leaving Zuwena in a home that suddenly felt cold and empty. She was still just a little girl, too young to understand the depth of loss, but old enough to feel the pain of it. Her father, Malik, was a good man, but a grieving one. He believed that Zuwena needed a mother's care, so he remarried a woman named Binta. On the surface, Binta was everything a stepmother should be. Kind, soft-spoken, always smiling. She spoke sweet words and promised to love Zuwena as her own. At first, Zuwena dared to believe her. She hoped that maybe, just maybe, happiness could return to their home. But behind Binta's gentle voice was a heart filled with hidden cruelty. The moment Malik was not around, her true nature began to show. The loving words disappeared, replaced by sharp commands and cold stares. Zuwena, once the cherished daughter of the house, now felt like an outsider in her own home. She had no idea that this was just the beginning of her struggles. At first, Zuwena thought Binta was just strict. Maybe she was still adjusting to their home, trying to settle in. But soon it became clear. This wasn't strictness. This was cruelty. The moment Malik stepped out of the house for work, Binta's sweet smile vanished like a mask being ripped away. Her voice, once soft and kind in front of Malik, turned sharp and cold. "Stop standing there! Do the dishes! Clean the floors! Wash Halima's clothes!" she barked. Zuwena was no longer treated like a daughter. She was nothing more than a servant in her own home. While Binta's daughter Halima wore the finest clothes and ate the best food, Zuwena was left with old torn dresses and scraps from their meals. She watched as Halima played and laughed, while she scrubbed the floors until her hands ached. She wanted to tell her father. She wanted to run into his arms and cry, to tell him how Binta changed the moment he left. But fear gripped her heart. Binta had warned her, "If you tell your father, he won't believe you. He loves me now. You'll only make him angry." So, Zuwena stayed silent, swallowing her pain like bitter medicine. Every night she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if her mother was watching over her, wondering why life had turned so cruel, wondering if her father would ever see the truth. But deep inside her, something stronger than pain was growing, a quiet fire, a determination. She would endure, she would survive, and one day she would rise. Zuwena's father, Malik, was a good man, but he was also a man too blinded by love to see the truth. He had always believed that a child needed a mother's care, and when he married Binta, he was sure he had done the right thing. He saw how Binta smiled at Zuwena in his presence, how she spoke softly to her, pretending to care. To him, their home was peaceful, and his daughter was safe, but the reality was far from what he imagined. The moment he stepped out for work, the warmth in Binta's eyes disappeared. She became someone else, cold, cruel, and unforgiving. Zuwena was no longer treated as a daughter, but as an unwanted burden, a servant in her own home. Every morning before dawn, Binta would wake Zuwena with a sharp knock on her door. "Get up! There's work to do," she'd snap, while Halima, her own daughter, slept peacefully in her soft, warm bed. Zuwena was already on her knees, scrubbing the floors. She washed clothes, cooked meals, and cleaned every corner of the house while Binta and Halima lived like queens. But when Malik came home, everything changed. Binta transformed back into the sweet, caring wife he adored. She would serve him his favorite dishes, cooked not by her hands but by Zuwena's. She would speak kindly to Zuwena, pretending as if they shared a bond. And Malik, exhausted from his long day, never questioned anything. Zuwena wanted to tell him. She wanted to cry in his arms and beg him to see the truth, but every time she tried to gather the courage, Binta's sharp gaze silenced her. "Your father loves me," Binta had whispered one night, her voice dripping with venom. "If you try to turn him against me, you'll be the one he sends away, not me." Those words haunted Zuwena. What if her father didn't believe her? What if he thought she was lying? The fear of losing the only parent she had left kept her silent. So, she suffered in the shadows, hoping, praying, waiting, for the day when her father's eyes would finally open. But days passed, then months, then years, and Malik remained blind. Zuwena had always known that Binta hated her, but she never thought the woman would go so far as to throw her out of her own home. Yet, on the day she turned 18, Her worst nightmare became a reality. It started with whispers, soft, poisonous words that Binta fed into Malik's ears night after night. Zuwaina is grown now. She's a burden to this house. A girl her age should be married or living on her own, not eating from her father's plate for free. At first, Malik hesitated. He loved his daughter, but Binta's words slowly took root in his mind. After all, wasn't she right? Zuwaina was no longer a child. Shouldn't she be independent by now? One evening, after dinner, Malik finally spoke the words that shattered Zuwaina's world. "It's time for you to leave, Zuwaina. You are old enough to take care of yourself." His voice was firm, but there was no anger in it. Just the cold finality of a decision already made. Zuwaina felt the air leave her lungs. She looked at her father, searching his face for any sign that he was joking, that he didn't mean it, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. He truly believed Binta's lies. "But Baba, where will I go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You are strong," Malik said, avoiding her gaze. "You will find your way." Binta stood behind him, her arms crossed, a victorious smirk hidden behind her fake concern. Halima, too, watched from the corner, pretending to be uninterested. Zuwaina wanted to scream, to shake her father until he saw the truth, but she knew it was useless. Binta had won. That night, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small bundle of belongings, Zuwaina walked out of the house she had once called home. The door closed behind her, and with it, the last piece of security she had in the world. She stepped into the cold, empty streets, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no money, no food, and no place to sleep. The city of Banjul stretched before her, vast and unfamiliar, its streets filled with strangers who didn't know her name, who wouldn't care if she disappeared into the night. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't break. She couldn't. She had been thrown away like she was nothing. But one day, she would prove to them all. She was something. She was everything. The streets of Banjul were nothing like home. The nights were cold, and the days were unforgiving. Zuwaina had nowhere to go, no family to turn to, and no money in her pocket. Her father's house, the only place she had ever known, was now just a painful memory. She wandered the streets until her legs felt too weak to carry her. After hours of walking, she found an old market stall, abandoned, broken, but still standing. It wasn't a home, but it was shelter. Curling up on the hard wooden floor, she hugged herself for warmth. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but there was nothing she could do. She hadn't eaten all day. She had never felt this kind of emptiness before. Days passed, and the struggle only grew worse. Finding food became a daily battle. She searched through trash bins, hoping to find leftover bread or a forgotten fruit. Sometimes kind strangers gave her scraps, but most people ignored her as if she didn't exist. The worst part was the humiliation. She saw people she once knew, neighbors, old schoolmates, even her father's friends. Some recognized her, their eyes widening in shock, but none of them helped. No one wanted to take in a homeless girl. One evening, weak from hunger, she stood outside a small food stall, the smell of grilled meat filling the air. Her stomach twisted painfully, and she couldn't stop staring at the plates of steaming food being served. But when she reached out, hoping to ask for just a little, the stall owner waved her away. "Go! I don't give free food," he snapped. Zuwaina's face burned with shame. She turned away, biting her lip to stop the tears from falling. How had her life come to this? But even as the world turned its back on her, she refused to break. She had survived Binta. She had survived being thrown away. She would survive this too. With hunger in her belly and determination in her heart, she told herself. This was not the end. One day, she would rise. Zuwaina had lost count of the days she had spent hungry and alone. Each night, she curled up in the abandoned market stall, her stomach empty, her body weak. The world had been so cruel to her, and she had started to believe that kindness no longer existed. But fate had other plans. One afternoon, she wandered through the streets, too exhausted to keep searching for food. The delicious smell of warm spices and grilled meat drifted from a small, run-down restaurant at the corner of the street. Her feet, as if pulled by the scent, led her there. Through the open doorway, she saw an elderly man behind the counter. He was dressed in a simple, faded shirt, his hands moving slowly as he cleaned a pot. His face was tired, lined with age, but his eyes held a warmth Zuena hadn't seen in a long time. Her stomach growled loudly, and the man looked up. His gaze fell on her torn clothes, her sunken cheeks, and the hopelessness in her eyes. Instead of shooing her away like others had, he sighed and gestured toward a chair. "Sit," he said gently. Zuena hesitated. Was this a trick? Another moment of false hope? But hunger left her with no choice. She slowly stepped inside and sat down. Moments later, the man placed a bowl of steaming rice and stew in front of her. Tears stung her eyes as she picked up the spoon. She hadn't had a real meal in days. She wanted to eat slowly, to savor every bite, but her body took over. She devoured the food, her hands shaking. The old man watched her in silence. When she was finished, he spoke again. "My name is Baba Jengo," he said. "I own this restaurant. Business is slow, and I could use some extra hands. If you're willing to work, you'll have food and a place to sleep." Zuena looked at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. A place to sleep? Food every day? All she had to do was work. She nodded quickly, afraid he might change his mind. "I'll do anything," she whispered. That day, for the first time in a long time, Zuena felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. Life at Baba Jengo's restaurant was not easy, but for the first time in a long time, Zuena felt safe. She worked hard every day, sweeping the floors, cleaning the tables, and washing dishes. In return, she had food to eat and a small room at the back of the restaurant where she could sleep. It wasn't much, but it was more than she had before. Baba Jengo treated her with kindness, and she was grateful, but deep inside, she wanted to do more. She wanted to prove her worth, to be more than just the girl who cleaned tables. Then, one day, everything changed. The restaurant's only cook, a grumpy old man named Musa, suddenly quit. "I'm done!" he shouted, throwing down his apron. "This place doesn't make enough money anyway." And just like that, he walked out, leaving Baba Jengo staring after him in shock. Zuena watched as Baba Jengo sighed and rubbed his forehead. There were customers waiting, but now there was no one to cook for them. She could see the worry on his face. If they couldn't serve food, they would lose customers. If they lost customers, they would lose everything. Her heart pounded as she took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Baba, let me cook," she said softly. Baba Jengo looked at her, surprised. "You can cook?" Zuena hesitated. She had never cooked in a restaurant before, but she had learned a lot from watching her mother long ago. She remembered the spices her mother used, the way she balanced flavors to make every meal delicious. Cooking had once been a happy memory for her, before her stepmother had turned her into a servant. "I can try," she said firmly. With no other choice, Baba Jengo nodded. "Go ahead." Zuena rushed into the kitchen, her hands shaking. She grabbed ingredients, her mind racing. She remembered her mother's lessons. "Cooking is not just about food, Zuena," her mother had once said. "It's about love. It's about making people feel at home." She poured her heart into every movement, chopping, stirring, tasting. The rich aroma of spices filled the air, drifting into the restaurant. Customers who had been grumbling about the wait suddenly lifted their heads, their noses twitching. When she finally served the dishes, there was silence. Then, the first customer took a bite. His eyes widened. "This is amazing!" he exclaimed. Others nodded, their faces lighting up with joy. "Who cooked this?" someone asked. Baba Jengo smiled proudly. "She did." Zuena's heart swelled with emotion. For the first time in years, she wasn't just a girl who had been abandoned. She wasn't just a homeless girl working in a small restaurant. She was Zuena, the girl who could cook, the girl who could change her own fate. The day Zuena cooked her first meal for the restaurant changed everything. Customers who had once come out of habit now returned because of the food. They told their friends, and soon, more and more people started filling the small restaurant. Baba Jengo watched in amazement. He had always dreamed of making his restaurant successful, but he never expected that a homeless girl he had taken in would be the one to bring it to life. Zuena, too, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building something. Every day, she spent hours in the kitchen, experimenting with different flavors, remembering the recipes her mother used to make. She added new dishes to the menu: spicy stews, soft warm bread, sweet rice puddings. Each dish carried a piece of her past, a memory of love and warmth. Customers noticed the change. "The food here tastes like home," one woman said with a smile. "Who is the cook?" Baba Jango proudly pointed to Zuena. "She is." Word spread quickly. Soon, the restaurant was always full, with people lining up outside just to taste Zuena's food. Some even traveled from other parts of the city just to eat there. But success didn't come without challenges. The small kitchen was not enough to handle so many orders. They needed better ingredients, more tables, and more help. Baba Jango, seeing Zuena's dedication, guided her through every step. He taught her how to manage money, how to deal with customers, and how to run a business. One evening, after closing the restaurant, Baba Jango looked at her with pride. "You have a gift, Zuena," he said, "and a gift like yours should not be hidden. One day this place will be more than just a small restaurant. It will be something bigger." Zuena smiled, her heart full of hope. For the first time she saw it too. She wasn't just cooking, she was creating a future. Years passed, and the small restaurant that once struggled to survive became one of the most popular places in town. People no longer came just to eat. They came to experience Zuena's cooking. Every dish carried warmth. Every meal told a story. Customers called her food magic, and the little restaurant was always full from morning until night. Through it all, Baba Jango watched with pride. He had taken in a lost girl with nothing, and now she was the heart of his restaurant. She worked tirelessly, pouring her soul into every dish, treating every customer like family. She wasn't just a cook anymore. She was a leader. One evening, after the restaurant had closed, Baba Jango sat with Zuena under the dim kitchen light. His face looked more tired than usual, and his hands shook slightly as he held a cup of tea. Zuena noticed the change in him. He was getting weaker. He wasn't the strong man he used to be. "Zuena," he said, his voice soft but full of emotion, "this restaurant, it belongs to you now." She froze, not sure if she had heard him right. "Baba, what do you mean?" He smiled gently. "I'm an old man, my dear. My time is coming, and I need to know this place will be in good hands. And there are no hands better than yours." Tears filled Zuena's eyes. This restaurant had saved her life. It had given her purpose, a home, and a family when she had none. And now, Baba Jango was giving her everything. "But Baba, I still need you," she whispered, her voice shaking. He reached out and held her hand. "I will always be with you," he said. "Every time you cook, every time someone smiles because of your food, I will be here." A few months later, Baba Jango passed away peacefully in his sleep. His loss shattered Zuena's heart, but she refused to let his dream die. She worked harder than ever, expanding the restaurant, hiring more staff, and creating new dishes that people couldn't stop talking about. The little restaurant that once struggled to stay open was now the most famous eatery in Banjul. People from all over the city came just to taste Zuena's food. Wealthy merchants, travelers, even government officials dined at her tables. She had started with nothing, abandoned and alone. But now, she was Zuena, the owner of the most beloved restaurant in town. And deep in her heart, she knew Baba Jango would be proud. Zuena's restaurant was no longer just a small eatery on the corner of a busy street. It had become a legend. People from all over Banjul, and even from faraway cities, came just to taste her food. The once abandoned girl, who had once searched for food in the trash, was now the most respected chef in town. But Zuena didn't stop there. She had a dream bigger than just one restaurant. Using her savings, she opened a second restaurant in a wealthier part of the city. Then a third. Each time, people rushed to eat at her places, eager to taste her cooking. She introduced new flavors, hired the best chefs, and made sure every restaurant carried the warmth and love that Baba Jango had once given her. Her name spread like wildfire. Newspapers wrote about her success, and wealthy businessmen invited her to exclusive events. She was no longer just a cook, she was an inspiration. With success came great wealth. Zuena, who had once slept in an abandoned market stall, now owned the biggest restaurant chain in Banjul. She wore elegant dresses, rode in fine carriages, and lived in a beautiful home. But despite all her riches, she never forgot where she came from. One day, as she stood in front of her newest restaurant, looking at the long line of customers waiting to eat, she smiled. She had made it. She had proven to the world, and to herself, that she was more than just a girl who had been thrown away. Zuena was now the richest and most influential woman in Banjul. But more than that, she was a symbol of strength, survival, and success. Time had not been kind to Binta and Halima. The wealth and comfort they once enjoyed were long gone. After Malik passed away, they lost everything: his money, his house, and the luxurious life they had taken for granted. With no one left to support them, they wandered the streets of Banjul, desperate for food and shelter. One afternoon, tired and hungry, they found themselves standing in front of a grand restaurant, the finest they had ever seen. The golden sign above the entrance sparkled in the sunlight, and the smell of delicious food drifted through the air, making their stomachs growl. "This place must be doing well," Binta muttered. She glanced at Halima, whose once smooth hands were now rough from struggle. Maybe they need workers. They hesitated for a moment, ashamed but desperate. Then, swallowing their pride, they stepped inside. The restaurant was breathtaking. Elegant chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Polished wooden tables gleamed under the soft lights, and well-dressed waiters moved gracefully, serving the guests. The air smelled of rich spices and freshly baked bread. It was nothing like the small, struggling restaurants they had begged at before. A woman sat at the far end of the room, dressed in a beautiful gown, her jewelry sparkling under the light. She was speaking softly to a waiter, her voice full of confidence. There was something familiar about her, but neither Binta nor Halima could place it. A manager approached them. "How can I help you?" he asked, eyeing their ragged clothes. We are looking for work," Binta said, her voice low with embarrassment. "We can clean, serve food, do anything." The manager raised an eyebrow. "Wait here," he said before walking toward the elegant woman. Binta and Halima stood nervously, looking around, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. They had no idea that the woman sitting before them, the owner of the most successful restaurant in Banjul, was the same girl they had once thrown away. As Binta and Halima stood nervously, waiting for the manager's decision, the elegant woman at the far end of the restaurant slowly rose from her chair. She walked toward them with quiet confidence, her golden jewelry catching the light, her long gown flowing behind her. The moment she stood before them, Binta felt a strange sense of familiarity, but she couldn't understand why. Then, the woman spoke. "Are you looking for work?" she asked, her voice calm yet powerful. Binta and Halima nodded quickly, their eyes filled with desperation. "Yes, madam," Binta said humbly. "We will do anything. We just need a chance." Zuena took a deep breath, her heart pounding. This was the moment she had imagined so many times. The two women, who had once treated her like a servant, who had thrown her out onto the streets with nothing, were now standing before her, begging for work. A slow smile formed on her lips. "Tell me," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Do you remember me?" Binta and Halima frowned in confusion. They looked at her closely, their eyes scanning her beautiful face, her expensive clothes, her graceful posture. She looked nothing like the weak, starving girl they had once mistreated. Then, like a bolt of lightning, realization hit them. Binta's eyes widened, her mouth opened, but no words came out. Halima gasped, covering her face with her hands. "No, it can't be," Binta whispered. "Yes," Zuena said firmly. "It's me, the girl you threw away, the girl you called a burden." She took a step closer, her gaze never leaving theirs. "The girl you thought would never survive." Binta's legs felt weak. She wanted to speak, to beg for forgiveness, but her throat felt dry. Halima, who had once lived like a princess, fell to her knees. "Please, Zuena," she sobbed. "Forgive us. We had no idea life would be this hard. We were wrong. So wrong." Zuena watched them for a long moment. She had once dreamed of this day, the day she would finally see them suffer as she had suffered. But now that it was here, she didn't feel the satisfaction she had expected. Instead, she felt something else. Power. Not the kind that came from wealth, but the kind that came from overcoming pain without letting it turn her heart cold. She had a choice to make: revenge or forgiveness. Zuwaina looked down at Binta and Halima, who were now trembling before her. The same woman who once threw her out of her own home now stood before her, weak and helpless. The same girl who had mocked her suffering was now on her knees, begging for mercy. She had every right to turn them away. She could have humiliated them, made them feel the same pain she had endured, but as she stared at them, memories of her own past rushed through her mind. The nights she had slept hungry, the humiliation she had faced, the cold streets that had nearly broken her. If Baba Jengo had not shown her kindness, she would not be standing here today. Kindness had saved her, not cruelty. Taking a deep breath, Zuwaina spoke firmly but calmly. "Stand up." Binta and Halima hesitated, unsure of what was coming next. Slowly, they got to their feet, their eyes filled with fear. "I could turn you away," Zuwaina continued. "I could let you suffer the way I did, but I won't." She took a step closer, her voice steady. "Because I am not like you." Binta's eyes filled with tears. "Zuwaina, Zuwaina raised her hand, stopping her. "No excuses. No apologies. What's done is done." She turned to the restaurant staff and said, "Give them food. Make sure they eat well." The workers immediately brought plates of warm, delicious food. The same food Binta had once refused to let Zuwaina eat in her own home. Binta and Halima stared at it in disbelief, their hunger overpowering their shame. As they ate, Zuwaina spoke again. "You will not be servants here. You will work. You will learn what it means to earn your place, to struggle, to fight for survival, not by crushing others, but by lifting yourself up through honesty and hard work." Halima wiped her tears as she nodded. "We will do anything, Zuwaina." "Thank you, Zuwaina." Simply nodded, then turned to walk away. She had nothing left to prove. Her success was her victory, but her kindness, that was her true power. Zuwaina's story became one of the most inspiring tales in Banjul. People spoke of the girl who was once abandoned, who had nothing but determination, and who rose to become the most successful woman in town. Her name was no longer whispered in pity. It was spoken with respect, admiration, and pride. But Zuwaina knew that true success was not just about wealth. She wanted to make sure no child ever suffered the way she had. With her growing fortune, she built a foundation for orphans, giving them food, shelter, and education. She made sure that every child who had no home, no family, and no hope would find a place where they were safe and loved. Young girls who once thought their dreams were impossible now looked up to Zuwaina. They saw in her the proof that no matter how hard life became, strength, kindness, and determination could change everything. One day, as she stood in front of her foundation, watching the happy children run and play, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Zuwaina." She turned slowly and saw her father, Malik. His face was older now, filled with regret and sorrow. His eyes, once blind to the truth, now held the weight of his mistakes. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I should have protected you. I should have seen what was happening." His voice broke with emotion. "Can you ever forgive me?" Zuwaina looked at him for a long moment. The pain of her past was still there, but she had learned something important. Forgiveness is not about forgetting, but about freeing yourself from the weight of anger. She sighed softly. "I needed you, Baba, but I became strong without you." She paused, then said, "I forgive you, but I hope you have learned from your mistakes." Tears streamed down Malik's face as he nodded. "I have." That night, the town held a grand celebration in honor of Zuwaina. People cheered for her, not just because she was the richest woman in Banjul, but because she had turned pain into power, hate into kindness, and suffering into strength. As she stood before the crowd, looking at the people who now loved and respected her, she smiled. She had won, not just in wealth, but in life.